we're back with you. This is an election night wrap-up. Jack Royer here in the CBS 42 studios. We want to get back to Steve Flowers right now. Steve, can you hear me okay over there?
I hear you well now. Thank you, Jack.
All right, that sounds good. Folks, thanks for staying with us on post-election day coverage. We want to show you kind of what we're looking at today. Thanks for bearing with us this morning at 7:24. Steve and I worked a late night last night. Art worked a late night last night. A lot to cover. Steve, you called it Christmas for you, election night. It certainly lived up to what we expected, didn't it?
It did. It was a great night. It was a big night for certain candidates. As I said earlier last night, at the beginning of that Senate race was the marquee event on the Republican side, and the presidential preference primary was the big marquee event on the Democratic side.
Yep.
There was no surprise if you had followed the polling. The polling coming out of the field for the last week indicated that Tommy Tuberville and Jeff Sessions were in a dead heat, and that's exactly how it wound up, with Bradley Byrne running about 24. Now, the key to this runoff 4 weeks from now, March 31st, will be probably where Bradley Byrne's votes go, because Sessions and Tuberville are around 33, and Byrne got about 24, and Roy Moore got 8%. So it'll be a really interesting race to see who gets Bradley Byrne's votes. The inherent advantage in that thing goes to Jeff Sessions, because they both hail from Mobile and Baldwin County, and that's where the bulk of Byrne's votes came from. An interesting tidbit about that race, Jack, since we're here in Jefferson County, is that Jefferson County's results mirrored the state exactly, 33, 33, 24, and 8.
What does that say to you?
Well, it's very unusual it happens like that, just a coincidence, I guess, but Jefferson County is the largest county in the state, and it had the same vote as the rest of the state. On the Democratic side, it was a tremendous night for Joe Biden. This victory Alabama gave him was a real integral part of a building block that he did throughout the South, and indeed throughout the country, to position himself as a moderate candidate in the Democratic primary for president. Super Tuesday was super for Joe Biden.
So let's talk about that. Bernie Sanders wins Colorado. Michael Bloomberg, it's as if he spent no money in this campaign, but he instead spent, hundreds of millions of dollars across the country. What do you do if you're Michael Bloomberg today?
If Biden was a winner, Bloomberg was a big loser. I really thought that he might run a close race here in Alabama, but he spent $8 million and got 12% of the vote. And it looks like that's about the way he did in other states, too. He really fell on his face in that his first foray in the first primaries he was in. Bloomberg was a very big loser last night. Elizabeth Warren has no other way to go either. She lost her home state. Matter of fact, ran third in her home state, and I don't see her having a way out either.
So, yeah, that's a great point. She didn't even come in second in her home state of Massachusetts. You would have thought Elizabeth Warren had a good deal of momentum in general. What has happened in the Democratic Party over the last 72 hours, Steve? Why?
There's been a coalescing.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was intended or by coincidence. There's something called the big mo in politics, and it's momentum. And Biden captured after South Carolina, and he's run heavy with it.
It's good news in the ongoing fight against the terrorist threat posed by jihadist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
If he had gotten a better showing, he could have stayed with his personal finances. However, having said that, he has nowhere to go.
What do you suspect he will endorse somebody here? I mean, if his mission was to beat Donald Trump, and he is very data-driven, Michael Bloomberg is, as we know, does the data now suggest Joe Biden is the best person to beat Donald Trump? Do you think he'll look at it that way?
I think he does. Actually, that's a very good question. He has said more than one time that he is interested in beating Donald Trump, and so therefore he has said, I am going to open up my checkbook to any Democratic nominee against Donald Trump. So he'll be a factor financially. He is going to continue to contribute, but he'll probably contribute to another candidate. I doubt he will contribute to Bernie Sanders, because Mike Bloomberg is not a capitalist because he captures social Democrat issues.
Yeah.
He's pretty much a capitalist. And he said that on the stage in the debate, that he was not going to be for Bernie Sanders. So he will. I would guess within the next 48 hours you'll see some movement if not sooner, that Elizabeth Warren gets out, Bloomberg gets out. But Bloomberg will continue to be an active part and will help.
It's good news.
We know in the next 27, 28 days, there will be anything but a coalescing in the Alabama GOP. Where do you see this race going now, other than, as you guys said last night, Katie, bar the door?
You know, I don't know that it gets any more negative than other campaigns. I mean, Sessions had to pull out some of the negative ads he was going to use in the runoff. I think they both knew they were headed for a runoff in about 10 days ago. And so Sessions saw Tuberville on his heels, and he pulled out some of the negative ads. The Florida thing was pulled out, which is one everybody knew was Achilles' heel for Tuberville. He really was living and voting in Florida when he qualified to run for the Senate in Alabama.
Does that matter, though, at this point?
It may not. It may not. It looked. I don't know what made Tuberville emotional last night. Whether he was feeling good about, feeling humbled about the good vote he got, or whether he didn't like being attacked. That's the book on him. He's never been in politics,
right.
And I actually told him this when he got ready to run for the Senate. He met with me and I visited with him. I said, Coach, you know, SEC football's tough, but you ain't ever been in Alabama politics. I said, it can be a lot tougher contact sport than college football. So they will vet him pretty well, you know, and somebody who's not been in political and public political life is not as cautious about things they do as far as, you know, their finances or their personal habits or anything like that, which becomes scrutinized. And one thing you said about Jeff Sessions, he's been through scrutiny. He's been a U.S. attorney. He's been a United States Senator for 20 years. And if there's anybody who's a Boy Scout in this race, an Eagle Scout, he was an Eagle Scout growing up, and he continues to be an Eagle Scout. If they were going to say anything bad about him, and they'd have found it earlier. So there's no skeletons in Sessions. The only thing they've got on Sessions is that he didn't do Trump's bidding as Attorney General, and they've got those tweets that are animosity. Yeah, that's the only thing you got. The other Achilles heel Tuberville has is he doesn't have the financial resources or campaign funds.
Let's talk about the out-of-state thing, the Florida thing, for just a second. Mitt Romney from the Northeast forever moves to Utah and runs for Senate and wins. Do people in this day and age, I mean, this is, to me, and I'm of a different generation. You tell me your opinion. To me, this country is so different than it would have been 50, 60 years ago if a guy just up and moved to a state and ran for Senate. Today, do younger voters care if Tommy Tuberville was registered in Florida a year ago? If they associate him with Alabama, they hear him talk about being at home, they think he's the person for the job. Does geography, does proximity matter as much as it used to in politics?
Definitely not, and I think it resonated last night because they've already used that ad against him for 10 days, and it didn't seem to sink him. But that may or may not be what's used. Sessions may have something else he may use. I don't know, but Tuberville has got the Trump tweets, and that's what you'll see run against Sessions.
Do you remember? You remember in 2017. The energy that was around Roy Moore's campaign before it was changed by allegations made against him, there was an energy, and I was in the room with it sometimes. You were in the room at that debate with Luther Strange. Is there an energy here for Tommy Tuberville that is different than the energy, if it exists, for Jeff Sessions?
Well, I think that Tuberville has a loyal following, and it's based on Auburn football fans. That's been his base all along, and Auburn football fans have done this before with a candidate named Fob James. Auburn football people feel a little bit picked on and like the small or younger child or orphan child, because 75 to 80% of all the football fans in the state of Alabama are University of Alabama football fans. About 20-25% are Auburn fans. So they've always had a little chip on their shoulder, and plus Alabama graduates have usually gravitated to politics and have been the state's leaders over the last 150 years. Graduates of the University of Alabama have been more political, and it's a political school. But in having said that, he has a base, and it is solid. And I don't know that, but I don't know if he can build on it. That's going to be the interesting thing, whether he can build on being the outsider it looks to be like Jeff Sessions and Bradley Byrne are almost twins as far as their background. And he also, Tuberville's whole approach, and last night he says, I beat the swamp.
Yep.
And referring to Jeff Sessions and Bradley Byrne both being creatures of Washington, D.C., and he was also lamenting in that conversation that he didn't have the funds. He has pretty much tapped out Auburn football fans for contributions. He only spent about $250,000. Well, he's going to need more than that in the runoff.
I'll ask a question on behalf of my dad and some other people who have speculated at this, and we know political prognostication is sometimes nothing more than just speculating. Will Alabama fans support Tommy Tuberville? Does that even matter at this point? Is that a factor?
I think a lot of Alabama fans that are lukewarm fans, in that 75%, there were some that voted for him. But I actually talked to a guy yesterday that, Tuberville has some detractors among Auburn fans. So it wasn't a total unilateral. All Auburn fans did not support Tuberville.
Right.
I was talking to a man here in Birmingham yesterday. He says, I voted early in Coleman, and he lives in Coleman. Said I voted. I'm a big Auburn fan, but I didn't like Tuberville when he was a coach there. So there's pros and cons to that. He was fired at Auburn. And one of Auburn's biggest supporters, Jimmy Rain, down in Abbeville, one of the wealthiest men in the state, who's become a big player politically, financially in the state, was backing Bradley Byrne, and he said, "I'm not going to be for Tommy Tuberville under any circumstances." So I think that money goes to Sessions. He's the one who helped fire Tuberville from coaching at Auburn. So he was fired as a coach at Auburn. So it wasn't like they left on not every Auburn fan likes Tuberville.
Real quick, while we can talk about it, a lot of other races last night. District 2 Congress, Jeff Coleman ran a heck of a campaign and is going to be in a runoff now. And then we've got Troy King losing. Just a lot to talk about last night. Also, Twinkle holds on to her seat on the Public Service Commission, 73% of the vote. Those are some of the other races. Anything, Steve, jump in if you want to talk about any of these. I do want to touch on Amendment 1 before we go in a second. That was a big deal to voters. But across the state, Greg Shaw holds his spot on the Supreme Court. Any surprises from the numbers you were looking at across the state last night?
The big victory, the biggest victory was Twinkle Cavanaugh getting about 75% of the vote in her re-election to the Public Service Commission. She was the biggest vote getter. The biggest surprise may have been the margin of victory of Greg Shaw in the state Supreme Court race. The only Supreme Court race on the ballot was Greg Shaw and State Senator Cam Ward. But Greg Shaw is the incumbent. He's been on that Supreme Court for over 12 years. He's run 3 times statewide, so he had a little bit of name ID going in. But I think that the Business Council of Alabama, they want pro-business and conservative judges, and Shaw has been that. Shaw has a very stellar pro-business, Business Council of Alabama blue ribbon voting record as a Supreme Court judge. So the Business Council used the old adage that's used in politics: don't leave old friends to make new friends.
Right.
Now, Ward may have been close to them in the state Senate, but Greg Shaw has been a safe vote for the business community in the state and the Supreme Court, so they gave him some money. And television still drives the vote a lot of times, and I would give the award for the best ad, whoever the Business Council got to do the ad for Greg Shaw, where he's out there with a bale of hay. It was a real quality ad that I think may have won the race for him. But the margin of victory surprised me. He won by 60-40, if I'm not mistaken.
Steve, stay with us 1 second. We can hear you. I'm going to take your second. Folks, stay with us as we try to do this. I want to show you the results. There we go. One more time. Tommy Tuberville. Those are the numbers from last night. 235,000 votes. Jeff Sessions, 227,000 votes. 1 percentage point separating the two men trying to become the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate seat currently held by Doug Jones. There's a look at the presidential race again from last night. If you're just waking up and tuning in this morning, we wanted to show you the latest numbers. Biden wins Alabama and pretty much every important state besides California. Sanders will win California, the majority of the delegates last night, but a fight to the nomination for the Democrats for president last night. So if you're just joining us, that's what happened overnight. And we want to bring in Steve again. Steve, let's talk about Amendment 1. Alabama voters saw it on their ballot last night. A resounding no. We said it on the air last night. Just absolute screaming at the governor. We do not want you or any governor appointing the state school board. We don't want to lose our right to vote on it. Kay Ivey issuing a statement. She seemed a little surprised. I have to say, I wasn't that surprised. I know we had talked about it, but you said it yourself. Alabama voters don't want to give up their right to vote. Is it as simple as that?
It is as simple as that, and that's all it was about. And I think that Governor Ivey, when she proposed that, thought it was an uphill battle. And the first polling showed it was going to get beat. And she got some business groups like Alpha specifically to contribute to try to pass it. But I was surprised, again, by the margin it lost by. I thought it'd lose 60-40. It lost 75-25 or thereabouts. And but it's just that simple. People, Alabamians, do not like to give up their right to vote for their state school board. Obviously, and then probably the same way if you said vote against to appoint the Supreme Court. Alabamians like to elect their leaders. That's all it was about.
And as simple as that. We enjoyed being with Governor Siegelman last night as well. He made points about his plan for education, would have brought money to education. A lot of people in Alabama think that a lot of money's been thrown at education over a lot of years. Plenty of schools here are plenty underfunded. Do you think the solution, because this amendment was pitched as we've got to do something, we're last in education in the country. What is that something if it's not this?
Well, I never did understand the concept of why an appointed school board would be better than elected. You've got some pretty qualified people on the elected school board currently. They're past superintendents and educators that are retired. And I think probably the lack of local support in some of the Black Belt counties makes it hard for them to have good public schools, and that's probably what equates to the. We have a real disparity in schools in Alabama. If you look at some of the counties, school systems here in metropolitan Jefferson and Shelby County, and even like Cullman and places like that, Scottsboro, and Auburn, Opelika, and places like that, they have really excellent public schools. It's just a matter of where they are.
What's your takeaway from last night? Did Alabama kind of do what you expected? And we'll look at video of the Democrats again here, just showing Bernie voting yesterday. Did this first talk about Alabama, and second, did the country do what you expected last night?
No, that was a big surprise. I sort of thought the Senate race was going to come down like it did. I'd seen some adequate and some efficient polling that indicated it was going to be a dead heat between Tubeville and Sessions. I saw that coming about 10 days ago, so I'm not surprised by that. I'm surprised by the margin of victory that Shaw beat Ward by, and I'm surprised by the Biden thing. The Biden thing is probably being resonated throughout the national talk shows, and national political pundits are really talking about that. That's the story, and we were a part of it. So it was a wise move for us to become an early Super Tuesday state, because we had an integral part of the Joe Biden coalescing and momentum effect. Momentum is very important in a campaign, and so that's what Biden has captured, the momentum. And like I say, Bloomberg's really failure to get any kind of traction at all, especially as much money as he spent. He needs to stick to making money and having a Bloomberg News rather than politics, I think.
He certainly spent a lot of money to lose big last night, winning only American Samoa, the South Pacific Islands. And that'll do it. For your reference, there are 50,000 people there, I believe, and about 8 South Pacific Islands. Hillary won it in 2016. So that's all Bloomberg can say for last night. Steve, any final thoughts before we go?
The presidential race has shaped up on the Democratic side. It looks like a two-man race between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. That was the real story nationwide. And we've got a very interesting runoff for the U.S. Senate with Tommy Tuberville and Jeff Sessions on March 31st. You and I will be covered between now and then.
Yep.
There'll be a lot of things happening in it, a lot of ads bought. I would say this, I've said it all along, that what also told me yesterday is the other news is that there was a tremendous turnout among Republican primary voters yesterday. Yep. And I think they were simply going to tell people they want Donald Trump reelected as president. So Trump is going to do extremely well in Alabama come November. and he's going to have some coattails, and Doug Jones is probably in trouble.
When, like you said, this is about to be a battle of who can love Trump the most, isn't it?
Exactly. It really
Right.
it has been and continue to be.
Steve, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, folks, that's it. That is how we do Election Day and Election Morning. The morning tends to be a little rougher on CBS 42. Thank you for bearing with us, for staying with us this morning as we kind of give you a recap of some of the races that matter to you, that you voted in yesterday. We appreciate your patience with us as we get CBS 42 now going. This is going to be a great tool for us as we cover politics for you at your local election headquarters. And over the next 28 days, as we want to unpack sort of what's happening in this race without the constraints of a television show. We've got 30 action-packed minutes every night to do the news, but this is going to allow us a place to have a little more conversation about what we cover. So we appreciate you sticking with us and watching with us as we do that. And folks, we'll see you tonight. The CBS 42 News at noon has your latest political coverage coming up today. We'll have a recap of everything from last night. We've got coverage right now at CBS42.com. You're probably watching on CBS42.com or on Facebook, but go to our website. We've got a recap, the latest numbers. You can find it. It's impossible to miss, actually, at CBS42.com. Just click on the Your Local Election Headquarters at the top of the screen, CBS42.com. It is literally the first thing on the homepage. I'm Jack Royer. For all of us here at CBS 42, I'll see you tonight on the news at 5. Till then, happy day after Election Day. Happy Wednesday. See you later on.